This is Colin Mockery, and you're listening to Dispatch Radio.
All right, welcome back to Dispatch Radio, and we get to talk about one of my favorite shows of all time. I don't know how many references we make on a weekly basis, folks. You guys send me emails all the time. I know the show's been off the air, but hey, it's back on Hulu, and I'm enjoying it, even though I actually own the box set. But I get to talk to one of the head writers, one of the great minds that dates back to the beginning, if I understand things right. Peter Mehlman is going to be with us. We'll talk about the show a little bit and talk about his new book that is out as well. Make sure you catch that. It's called I Won't Always Be This Great. Peter, how are you, my friend?
I'm fine. How are you?
All right, so blessed. And I tell you what, it's quite a wild ride for you, and it's got to be an interesting way to look back at your resume of work and different things that you accomplish. And let me start right with the book. I know it came out in the fall, and it's one of those great comedic books, I think, of last year. And what was one of the things that you really wanted to set out and strive to accomplish?
Well, I really just wanted to set out and accomplish writing a novel that was, both funny and, had a little bit, well, not a little bit, a strong serving of poignancy to it because, obviously on Seinfeld, any kind of, human emotion other than, like maybe envy and spite were pretty much outlawed. So, that was nice. And I think I also wanted to write a book that was like a genre unto itself, and the genre in this book is a marriage that actually works. That's like whoever writes about a good marriage, nobody.
There's not very many. That's true. Was it easy for you to kind of put pen to paper for something like this in a novel form after doing the kind of writing that you did for so many years?
Yeah, actually, it was probably easier than script writing for me because, I started out in journalism, as a writer at the Washington Post, and, I wrote for magazines for years. So the idea of actually writing full sentences comes very easily to me. And, it was, I know Seinfeld kind of stands out in my resume, but I always thought of Seinfeld as kind of like a detour in my career. It was like this thing where all of a sudden I was writing, dialogue and, trying to be funny all the time. So, this is really much more back on my natural course.
Now, how did you approach sort of sketching that out? Because obviously when you do sketch comedy, as you mentioned, that the challenge of trying to be funny all the time and all that becomes a little bit different when you're trying to sort of format and structure a novel.
Yeah, I didn't think of it consciously very much. I tried to just go by instinct, which, most of the time it doesn't work. I always advise people to never trust their instincts. But in this case, it happened to work out.
It's called I Won't Always Be This Great. I love it. Don't trust your instincts, but trust your instincts. That's great advice for Peter Mehlman. I Won't Always Be This Great, and it's a great little book. You definitely need to pick it up, get a couple laughs out of it, and get a little dive deeper into the mind of Peter and one of the brain trusts that were behind the great Seinfeld run. And I know I want to go back to the beginning because I didn't actually know this, and your career actually started way back in working with Howard Cosell. Now, that is an icon in and of itself. What was that experience like?
It was really amazing. We did a sports journalism show called Sports Beat, which is kind of a forerunner to what Brian Gumbel does now. And, Cosell was so huge and popular and loved and hated at the same time in a way that, doesn't seem to happen anymore. I don't think there's that much heat on any one human being for that extended period of time like there was on him. So it was really like being in the center of the sports universe. Any interview that we wanted to get, we could just say the name Howard Cosell and sports figures would feel like they would be getting an honest and fair shot at giving their point of view. So, it was just really thrilling, and he was, on top of that, it was a lot of fun because he happened to be extremely funny in kind of a locker roomy sense of humor, but it was really a blast. And it was a tiny staff, and I'm still close with the 9 or 10 people who were on the staff, and it was really amazing.
Of course, it was meeting Larry David again in your move in Los Angeles that kind of helped prompt to the partnership there to say, we're working on this project and that kind of thing. And when you first move into that that pilot mode, the apartment, the first couple episodes, what was sort of the infrastructure of how you would construct Seinfeld episodes in the beginning? This before it kind of exploded onto the scene, so to speak.
Well, it pretty much remained the same throughout the run of the series, certainly for as long as Larry was there. You'd have to, unlike all other sitcoms, you'd have to come up with storylines on your own. It wasn't a group thing. You'd have to come into Larry and Jerry's office armed with a bunch of ideas for each character, and you discuss each one. And I would always try to, have ideas that would seem funny and provocative in one sentence. So you'd come in and you'd give your ideas, and Larry and Jerry would say, yes, I love that, or no, that's not doing much for me, or actually we did that already, or something like that. And, you'd have 3 or 4 storylines that they really liked, maybe one for each character, hopefully, and you'd be sent off to write pretty much on your own. It wasn't like other sitcoms where everything was, mapped out within a group context, and then you'd pretty much go off and fill in the blanks, which is really not very difficult. Just writing dialogue is not that hard. It's coming up with the stories that's really difficult.
If you're not real familiar with the Seinfeld universe, as I am, Peter is credited with coining some of the big catchphrases that you probably know and love, like yada yada and spongeworthy and shrinkage, among the most top of the list, so to speak. Peter, was there a character that was more difficult than the others to write for?
For me, it was much more difficult to write for Kramer. I, for some reason, always had trouble coming up with ideas for Kramer. Most writers had much more trouble coming up with ideas for Jerry and Elaine because they were more grounded, normal people. But they were easier for me, much easier, especially Elaine, which, was really important because I never thought that you could write a Seinfeld episode without a strong Elaine story. Kramer gave me fits because, you always were thinking of, what could he do in terms of physical terms and things like that. And it took me about 3 seasons to realize that I could take some of the ideas that I had for Jerry and give them to Kramer, and he would just explode them on his own through, Michael's own acting ability. For instance, I had the story where I had a story lying around where Jerry had a low sperm count, and he was told that he should shift from briefs to boxers. And it seemed like a normal problem for a normal person. But then I was thinking, if I gave that idea, that very normal idea, to Kramer, he could just make such a huge thing of it that, it would work for him. And
next thing you know, there's nothing between us but a polycotton mix.
If I remember correctly, it was a thin layer of gabardine.
It is absolutely fantastic. Peter Mehlman stories and reflecting on Seinfeld, but also we just want to really make sure that you get a chance to check out his novel, I Won't Always Be This Great, which is just a great comedic piece and a great reflection. He mentioned marriage, and it really, really is just a good thing. You need to check that out. We'll try to link to Amazon in particular. Make sure I know everybody's going through there nowadays. And Peter, do you have it available through your a personal website or anything like that we can link to?
There's, yes, on keymelman.com. And by the way, the title is actually It Won't Always Be This Great.
It Won't Always Be This Great. I keep saying it wrong. I'm sorry about that.
That's quite all right. It's a common mistake. The funny thing is it took me forever to come up with a title, and then I heard a George Harrison song on the radio where he said, it's not always going to be this great. And I said, that's my title. That's what it's about.
There you go. When you look back on some of the episodes, and of course, the raging pop culture universe that kind of just adopted Seinfeld into like life-changing lexicons of people's way they talk and references that they make, is there some that just still surprise you that this took, so to speak?
Yeah, it's always surprising, and it was surprising at the time. I was just, we just come up with funny ways of saying things, but we had no idea that they were going to catch on. And the funny thing is, the only time I ever thought, as I was writing, that something might catch on, it didn't. In the Yada Yada episode, there was also a thing about, called anti-dentite, where people were, it was kind of like a racism against dentists.
Right.
And as soon as I wrote anti-dentite, I said, "Oh boy, this one's gonna take off." And of course, it didn't. So, these are not things that you could actually do consciously. It's always kind of a weird mix that things take off in the culture. You can't plan it. It just, it takes off on its own momentum.
You mentioned how Michael would take the roles and the lines and just they'd transform into this Kramer character. Who was the easiest probably to work with of bringing your work to life?
I can't really point to one. They were all so great. The four of them were so amazing. The most interesting one for me was Julia, because she would never say the lines the way I heard them during the writing. All of a sudden, I'd hear her do the line for the first time, and she'd accent a word that I was like, oh my God, I never thought that was the way she was going to say it. And then, of course, I'd realize, oh wait, what she's doing is 10 times better than what I thought. It was an experience that really spoiled you in so many ways. And, one of them is just, being around actors that make your writing so much better.
Obviously, in the wake of writing your novel and those kinds of things, what else do you have sort of in the works that you're really, really working on right now, or that you're hoping to work on here soon?
Well, two things. One, I recently started doing stand-up comedy. And,
Wow.
I have about 18 minutes of material right now, and I'm really kind of enjoying that. I feel very little pressure. So, most of the things that strike fear into people about doing stand-up are not really affecting me. So that's been really fun. It's more almost like a hobby. And I'm about, 80% done with another novel.
That's fantastic news. That's awesome. That's great. Congratulations on that as well, and look forward to seeing that drop.
Yeah, it's, you just keep turning it out and hopefully throwing it against the wall and seeing what sticks.
Folks, it's been a great chance to talk to Peter Mehlman, and if you're not a Seinfeld fan, I really don't know what's wrong with you. You need to come over to my house, and we'll spend some time going through some of the greatest episodes, and Peter is definitely credited with contributing a large part of that, and it is great. And It Won't Always Be This Great is Peter's book, and we'll link to that, link to P. Mehlman, I believe is what he said, .com. We'll make sure we get all that live, make sure that's active so you can pick up a copy for yourself, and we look forward to seeing his next book or catching him on the road doing some stand-up. So, Peter, thank you again for your time.
My pleasure, really. Total